Who or what would you consider a loser? Someone who likes comics and anime. Well, no, otherwise a good percentage of the Earth's population would carry around that title. Perhaps a loser is someone who has no power? The power to change their fate and take a hold of their own future. This isn't necessarily true either. A loser can represent many things. For example, you the viewer are a loser. However, there exists a line between loser and
Misogi Kumagawa Kamijou Touma. The minus always gets the worst outcome, and the level 0 can cast away the world's distortions. Both seem harmless at first, painfully average in every way. They normally wouldn't stand out in a crowd. But you know, their plain natures may actually be their strength, because if you have no discernible qualities, you're often underestimated, and this underestimation is what causes their true natures to manifest. Within both worlds of Medka box and a certain magical index, supernatural abilities run rampant, with some even having the power to control the fabrics of reality. So it's interesting that the two most unassuming individuals both have the power to not only nullify and dispel these supernatural phenomena that can strike fear to the arrogant hearts of those who think they own the world. The good loser Kumagawa and the illusion killer Kamijou Touma. The ultimate minus versus the reference point of the world. What would truly happen if these similar yet different people happen to clash in both mind, body, and power?
メダカちゃんの次なる敵、熊川みそぎくんの話を。マイナスの中のマイナス、カフカの中のカフカ、混沌よりも灰よるマイナス、熊川みそぎくんの話を。
Kumagawa can control causality, or more specifically, make anything into nothing, with a signature ability, all fiction. Basically, Kumagawa can turn any physical and non-physical phenomenon into fiction, thereby erasing them from the world. This ability has a variety of applications. When Kumagawa takes any form of damage, whether big or small, all fiction will activate, and all damage he took will be erased in mere seconds. Kumagawa can be pummeled multiple times, stabbed, dismembered, blown up, suffocated, and decapitated. Well, all that will mean nothing, as all fiction will make every piece of damage into fiction. Hell, killing Kumagawa won't matter at all, as all fiction can undo his own death, either instantly or a week after his initial death, showcasing how the ability can be active even long after Kumagawa has died. All fiction is not a purely defensive power, it can work on pretty much everything in the universe. The abnormality named Color of Beauty has the power to control color, which comes with a variety of effects. For example, the color gray can force objects to become brittle, shattering after a touch. The color blue simulates the color of bruising, causing a user to take damage and even pass out. In order to combat this overpowered ability, Kumagawa used all fiction to erase the concept of color from the world, thereby making it impossible for the ability to be used. This shows the absolutely insane range all fiction has, as it was able to cover the range of the entire universe. Kumagawa doesn't need to touch you with his physical hand for all fiction to function. That's because his entire body, and even his mind, is a medium for the ability, so the simple act of punching him could be dangerous. There are other ways all fiction has been used. Kumagawa can make his aura into fiction, erasing his presence from the world. Kumagawa can turn his fatigue into fiction, giving him infinite stamina. And Kumagawa can erase the concept of sound traveling through space, allowing him to hear people from a distance. When Kumagawa applies all fiction to an opponent, he can make their senses into fiction, rendering them blind, deaf, or even mute. The most dangerous application of all fiction is using it to erase an individual from existence, which can be done without any warning. But if Kumagawa decides to be nice, he can use all fiction to heal your injuries so instantaneously that it doesn't even look like you took damage at all. This can even apply to clothing. In fact, you can't even die around him, as Kumagawa can use all fiction to resurrect you. There's seemingly no limit to what all fiction can do. The only thing holding it back is Kumagawa's imagination, which makes sense because if he wasn't so plain and uninterested in the things around him, he could easily make all of existence into fiction, thereby erasing existence itself. It's worth noting that all fiction does have a few weaknesses. First, all fiction can be tricked with attacks that don't exist, such as with color beauty, which fooled Kumagawa's brain into thinking he had been damaged. Second of all fiction will become useless if Kumagawa is put in some sort of death loop. Third, all fiction cannot erase other minus abilities. Fourth, Kumagawa's own mindset essentially prevents him from using all fiction to its fullest potential. But despite this, all fiction essentially has no limits in what it can do. It's not full-on reality manipulation, but it gets sorta close. Kumagawa's signature and iconic screws are his main form of attacking. Kumagawa can summon giant screws out of thin air, which he can throw towards opponents at high speeds, or wield them like thrusting weapons. Kumagawa can summon dozens of screws at a given time, which can easily be used to take down a room full of people. These screws don't seem to follow the concept of speed and bypass durability, as they can be summoned within an opponent instantly without Kumagawa moving a muscle. The screws are strong enough to penetrate rock, pin people to walls, and pierce through the human body. But despite this, they don't actually kill anyone they are impaled through. They in fact only deal a small amount of damage. This may be because the screws are imaginary structures given form. Kumagawa used the same ability to summon an imaginary sword, meant to kill magical creatures. Despite this, the screws are a medium for Kumagawa's secondary ability, called Bookmaker. Bookmaker is basically an automatic nerf button. When the screws of Bookmaker pierce an opponent, they are basically forced to become a minus, bringing that person to Kumagawa's level in both body, spirit, skill, intellect, and talent. This will apply to anyone regardless of their level of power. Once they are hit by Bookmaker, they will be forced down to Kumagawa's level in every way. Even the abnormalities they happen to possess will also be nullified. Bookmaker has the power to also seal things away. Once Kumagawa plunges multiple Bookmaker screws into an opponent, they will be sealed away for an undetermined amount of time. This is powerful enough to seal away a primordial being who literally possessed a quintillion different powers and could destroy a star with one effortless attack. Obviously all this wouldn't matter if Kumagawa was being thrown around like a ragdoll. Luckily, Kumagawa is actually pretty skilled in close quarters combat, as he's able to take on dozens of people at the same time, on multiple occasions, even when he's surrounded on all sides. His speed is enough that he could at least keep up with Medka for a brief period, a character who could move at hypersonic speeds on some occasions. This is especially impressive with his screws, which he can throw with precise precision. Since he considers himself the weakest man in the world, Kumagawa supposedly knows every human weak point and can use that to his advantage.
イマジンブレーカー、俺の右手に宿っている摩訶不思議な力。それが異能の力であるならば、触れただけで打ち消すことができるらしい。だがこんな素敵な力も、夏休みの宿題に対しては何の効果もない。
The Imagine Breaker is a mysterious power that currently resides within the right hand of Kamijou Touma. It basically has the power to negate or destroy any supernatural power within the realms of science and magic. Once the Imagine Breaker makes contact with something that's deemed to be an expert power or magic, the Imagine Breaker will instantly dispel them in mere seconds. It doesn't matter if it's a blessing, a curse, a weapon, or even something meant to fix the world. The Imagine Breaker will nullify their presence regardless. Oftentimes, the Imagine Breaker can only be used in a defensive way, due to being relegated to Touma's right hand. But no matter what abilities you throw Touma's way, or what defensive abilities they may have, the Imagine Breaker will ensure that they will always be dispelled. The presence of Imagine Breaker virtually ensures that Touma is immune to almost every spell or esper power in the world of Index, especially those that affect his entire body. For example, Angel Falls a spell which alters the state of the entire world by swapping out the bodies or faces of everyone on Earth. So your math teacher, for example, could suddenly be the President of the United States. Touma himself remained unaffected, likely due to the presence of Imagine Breaker. The Imagine Breaker is also constantly negating invisible concepts and places like ley lines and the AIM diffusion fields emitted by the imaginary number school district, enough to make it noticeable to outside or inside parties. Luck is another passive and invisible force the Imagine Breaker nullifies. Luck is said to be tied to the concept of death. This doesn't mean that Touma is immortal, but it does mean that he's incredibly hard to kill, no matter the speed or power of those he faces. The strongest attacks the Imagine Breaker has withstood is those that can destroy the fabrics of the universe. Unless they follow certain loopholes, the Imagine Breaker should be able to nullify attacks that scale to the entire world or the entire universe. The Imagine Breaker does have a couple of weaknesses. It sometimes can't fully nullify something unless Touma finds the source of its power. Attacks that regenerate faster than a nullification can withstand Imagine Breaker's effects, and there are some attacks the Imagine Breaker can't fully nullify if the attack itself is somehow classified as natural to the world. But most of the time, Imagine Breaker doesn't have a limit in what it can and cannot nullify. The The Imagine Breaker is pretty powerful on its own, but it becomes even more effective when paired with Touma's precognition, which allows him to anticipate and avoid any incoming attack by analyzing the movements of his opponents to the smallest degree. Touma uses this in conjunction with the Imagine Breaker to accurately negate any incoming spell or superpower. This precognition and Imagine Breaker combo is powerful enough to react and dispel lightning, which can move at speeds of 270,000 miles per hour, which to put in perspective can travel around the planet in 6 minutes, meaning Touma with precognition can react to objects moving 1/3 the speed of light. However, Touma's most impressive feat with his precognition comes in his final battle with the magic god Artemis, which he was directly killed by her over 10,000 times. However, each death only proved his skill with his precognition to the point where he could avoid attacks that could hit instantly. Touma knows a thing or two about fistfights. He's not an expert at fighting or anything, but he can hit surprisingly hard. No matter how strong an opponent is, Touma will charge at them regardless and will do surprisingly well. So we've now established the ability sets of Touma and Kumagawa. Now it's time to see who would come out on top. For the purposes of this battle, I thought it would be interesting if we created a specific battle scenario. Kumagawa and Touma will both be on 2 separate sides of an arena, with a distance of 200 meters. Touma's goal is to close the distance, while Kumagawa's goal is to stop Touma from closing in. At this distance, Kumagawa's first thought would be to use the screws to restrain or incapacitate Touma. Since they don't follow the concept of speed, they should hit him instantly, but Touma's precognition should be able to help him to avoid them, since he has dealt with Artemis' crossbow, which similarly shoots projectiles that hit instantly. Even if the screws hit, they have been shown to be destroyed on several occasions, so one touch from Imagine Breaker should instantly dispel them. That's 20 meters cleared. Kumagawa may try to use All Fiction to blind Touma, remove one of his limbs, or erase him from existence, but the Imagine Breaker will prevent that from happening. Ars Magna has an ability that can bring a caster's imagination into the real world and control reality in a limited way. For example, he could kill an opponent with a single word, but all this would be dispelled once Touma touched the object or area the spell was created. So Kumagawa blinding Touma or removing his limbs will be undone with a single touch. Trying to erase Touma wouldn't work either, since Imagine Breaker would nullify this possibility. Touma has already survived reality erasure on several occasions. Another 40 meters cleared. Next, I could see Kumagawa turning the air into fiction, but this would be counterintuitive. First of all, Kumagawa himself would suffocate, and even if All Fiction brings him back to life, the air still wouldn't exist, thus fulfilling the criteria for one of his weaknesses. So he's likely not going to use this. Second of all, the Imagine Breaker would just passively nullify it. The presence of Imagine Breaker, after all, can resist the effects of spells that can change the nature of the world, such as Angel Fall and the Magic God's reality manipulation. So any use of All Fiction that can erase or replaces an aspect of our world shouldn't affect Touma in a major way. The Imagine Breaker can nullify other invisible parts of our world, like the phases of the universe. Phases cover the entire universe and can be used to remove certain laws from the world. If the Imagine Breaker can destroy phases, then it's safe to say All Fiction's reality manipulation wouldn't be all that effective. I'm not saying Imagine Breaker could fully undo All Fiction's universe level changes, but Touma would be mostly unaffected. Okay, so what if Kumagawa uses All Fiction to erase the presence of Imagine Breaker? Well, that's not possible either. Like I said, the simple fact that Imagine Breaker negates any supernatural power, whether science or magic, means it can't be controlled or manipulated by said forces. If they could, Artemis wouldn't have had to manipulate reality over 100 billion times. She could have just taken it with ease. 80 meters cleared. So it looks like Touma managed to close the distance with Kumagawa, and Kumagawa should now fully comprehend the threat the spiky-haired boy poses. If All Fiction and the screws can't bypass the defensive power of Imagine Breaker, then Kumagawa's only other option comes in the form of Bookmaker. If Touma's brought down in every way to Kumagawa's level, yeah, there's a problem. You guessed it, Imagine Breaker. Touma would be immune to the effects of Bookmaker. All Touma would have to do is touch the screws in order to nullify it. And if not, it would be negated passively. Kumagawa is now forced to trade blows with Kamijou Touma. But I'm gonna be honest with you, despite everything I just said until now, I just don't see any way Touma could beat Kumagawa. The prospects that he could ever remotely win was All Fiction. There are 3 paths this fight could go on based on my claims. Kumagawa outlasts Touma. The presence of All Fiction means Kumagawa can simply turn his own fatigue into fiction, giving him infinite stamina, and any damage Touma would deal would instantly be healed, as if it never happened. This combined with Kumagawa's superior speed and strength would mean Touma would get slowly withered down, while Kumagawa stays in top shape. Eventually, even Touma would run out of energy. Touma grabs Kumagawa with his right hand and beats on him until he submits. This strategy isn't going to work. Kumagawa is insanely tenacious. No matter how brutal the beating or how powerful his opponent is, Kumagawa will always get back up and continue to fight. Even the threat of death is not enough for him to waver. Touma can beat on Kumagawa non-stop for 3 years straight, and he wouldn't show a single sign of giving up. Touma wouldn't even get that many free hits, because again, Kumagawa is incredibly skilled. Kumagawa gives up. This would be Touma's best shot at winning. Touma is an incredibly persuasive person who can influence even the most egotistical of people. And just like Kumagawa, Touma will keep getting back up, no matter how many times you turn him down. Kumagawa isn't weak-minded, but he does see himself as the weakest person in the world. Seeing someone who's just as weak and just as looked down upon in society stand up to him would sway him a little bit. That's the type of person Kumagawa is, a man who's willing to accept a loss, even if he's not necessarily weaker or stronger. If he believes that Touma's willpower is stronger, then he's fully willing to throw the whole fight, similar to Touma's battle with Artemis, where although she was vastly stronger and could kill Touma with ease, she eventually lost due to sheer will to keep fighting no matter the odds. Look, I love Touma just as much as the next person, but he's basically up against the human embodiment of humanity's negative qualities. The Imagine Breaker would help Touma immensely, but Kumagawa is faster, stronger, and more versatile. It would pretty much be Touma vs Artemis all over again, but with a slightly weaker opponent. I'm not saying Kumagawa's victory would be an easy one, but I'm not gonna pretend Touma's more powerful than he really is. So either Kumagawa beats Touma in a battle of endurance, or Kumagawa gives up due to Touma's overwhelming willpower, but that's basically just Kumagawa sparing Touma.
つまり
つまろうがつまるまいが、また勝てなかった。